Welcome, Dashka Slater. Thank you so much for speaking with us about your beautiful book, 57 Bus. The first question is, you had to conduct many interviews for the book, we imagine. Who was your favorite interview partner, and which person was most inspiring to you?
It's so hard to pick one because I loved all the interviews I did for this book. And, you never know when you walk into a room to talk to somebody what the conversation is going to be like. And there were so many times when I walked out of that room just feeling like the luckiest reporter in the world that I had found this person who had some kind of new insight to offer me and was also just so fun to talk to. And one person that was particularly true of was Caprice Wilson, who I had no idea what to expect when I walked in. I knew that she had known Richard in school. And then here she was, just this incredible spark of energy and light, and somebody who had given so much of herself to her students and changed so many lives and was so important to Richard, and was also just hilarious and funny and had this incredible backstory of her own, which I tell in the book.
Yeah, amazing. I can imagine. Yeah. She's a beautiful, I want to say character, that's not true. You would draw her as the beautiful person you just now describe her as. Yeah. And if you had been the judge in Richard's case, what would have been your verdict, do you think?
This is a hard question to answer because I wish that the entire case and many cases were not in the criminal justice system at all. Richard was a juvenile. He freely admitted his responsibility, his guilt. So, a verdict is obviously guilty. And yet that, I think, feels unsatisfying to most readers. The question is much more what should happen next. And that's where a different kind of system for dealing with criminal issues like restorative justice becomes so much more useful. Because I think what readers of the book tend to feel is like, isn't there some way that everybody can have their needs met, that everybody can feel safe, that everybody can become the person they want to be, and a person who feels safe in this world, and a person who will not cause harm. And our criminal justice system doesn't really offer those kinds of solutions, but they are out there. One thing that Richard absolutely needed was some counseling and some help to deal with the things that had happened in his life, and to help him figure out how to, avoid getting, sort of talked into doing something that didn't sit right with him. And so if I had been the judge, I would have sent this outside of the criminal justice system and into the restorative justice system to try and find solutions that worked for everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you. And the next question is, what was your main motivation for bringing the book to life? Do you have a personal connection to the topic it covers?
Well, the whole story takes place in my neighborhood. When I'm talking to student groups, often I just start gesturing like it was just right out there, because I am walking distance from the bus stop where the bus pulled over. And after Sasha was set on fire, Sasha's family lives in my neighborhood. Richard went to my neighborhood high school, which is Oakland High School. And the 57 bus is the bus that my own kid took to school, to a different public high school in Oakland. So it's as personal and local as it could be. And when the incident happened, I learned about it like everybody else from my neighbors, and had that sense of how could this have happened. But also I felt like I knew kids like Richard and I knew kids like Sasha. And that was the other thing that drew me to the story, was that they were such relatable young people. And so it was a story that I wanted to tell because I felt that young people would be able to relate to this story and would be able to engage with kind of the underlying issues and be curious and passionate about those issues, about what does justice look like in a situation like this? What is the role that race plays? What is the role that gender plays in the lives of the people in the book, but also in the lives of the students themselves? And so my secret mission with this book was to open up the possibility of conversations on these kinds of topics, because to me, that's the most exciting thing in the world, is when people get to talk about deep issues, and when the people who are going to be running the world in a very short amount of time are getting a chance to explore their own ethics and their own values and their own beliefs around these issues.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. And is there a character, you've sort of hinted at it, is there a character who's dear to you and who undergoes the strongest development, you think?
They're all dear to me, let's just say at the outset. I loved these people and I worried about them because, you know, when I was working on this book, the end was not determined. We didn't know how it was going to turn out. When I started, Sasha was still in the hospital. Richard was facing this possibility of life in prison. And so I was just watching them and their families and hoping that everybody was going to survive this experience. A couple people that leap to mind, though, who are kind of not the main characters, but whose journeys I think were particularly interesting. One is Dan Gale, who is the person who rescued Sasha, who saved Sasha's life on the bus, the Good Samaritan. And that experience of saving Sasha's life ended up being really pivotal for him and helped make him make some changes in his life, which he talks about in the book. And there are a few other people who are kind of minor-ish characters who I saw really grow a lot in the course of the story. Another one is Andrew, who was Sasha's really close friend from middle school, and then they kind of grew apart and had some separation that neither of them was really clear on why it had happened. And through the course of the book, Andrew kind of makes this journey and ends up getting back in touch with Sasha after a long break. So those were things that I loved watching happen as I was reporting.
The publication of the book led to a lot of criticism and book bans in various states. Did you expect such a reaction? And would this have been a reason for you to stop the publication?
The funny thing is that I had a lot of fear about this before the book came out. I had, lots of fears about whether the book was going to negatively impact anybody in the story, for one thing, because people can be mean on the internet. And also whether people would be willing to go on a journey in which there's no villain and everybody, the reader is being asked to feel concern and compassion for the person who caused the harm as well as the person who was harmed. And would people feel, all the love and concern and support of Sasha, and also have room in their hearts for Richard? Those were things I worried about. And of course, I knew that I was talking about a trans kid, and I was talking about race, and some people might have problems with that. But when the book came out, there was none of that kind of backlash. And so I had many years of feeling like, I worried for nothing. And then after 2020 and the COVID pandemic, and the mobilization of far-right forces, first in response to mask mandates and those kinds of things, and then to ban books. All of a sudden, years later, there was this huge backlash. And that has been very troubling and concerning to me, as not only because people don't get to read my book in certain places, but also because the overall message is that, people like Sasha, people like Richard are not fit to be read about by young people. And I think that is, not only obviously untrue, but also a very dangerous message. So obviously I worried about it before it happened, and I did not do anything to change the book in any way. I will never let censors or small-minded people or hateful people affect what I write. I have my new book, Accountable, is also about some difficult topics, and I know that the same people will probably come after that book too. But the importance of these conversations matters way more to me than what anybody who most of the time hasn't even read the book, but has just, gone to a website that tells them what they should be mad about, and then they're mad about that.
Yes. Did your view on Richard change during your research?
When I started, I didn't know anything about Richard, so it was a blank slate, and I was open to any possibility. It was possible that he was a very disturbed kid who had woken up that morning and with the intent, I'm going to hurt somebody who's queer. In which case, what I would have wanted to know is why? Why do you feel that way? How did that become your, first thought in the morning? Or that, as many people thought that, it was an accident, it was completely an accident. He didn't mean it at all. And, he just was waving a lighter around. And, I was open to that too. Like, I didn't know. And one of the things that being a reporter requires is that my only allegiance is to the truth. And so I began to build an understanding of who Richard was with each interview. And it changed all the time, because I started from zero. And then I began to talk to first his attorney, then members of his family, and then Caprice. And I began to, hear a different story, this story about this young person who was incredibly sweet and a loyal friend and was working to do better in his life. And so then when I watched the video of the fire, I was surprised again, because I had really, all of the people close to him were convinced that he had not been intentional in flicking that lighter. And in fact, he had been intentional in flicking that lighter. And so, so then I had to add that into the mix, that he had in fact flicked that lighter 4 times. So what was that about? So that was something I needed to understand. And, he says some stuff in the police interview that's offensive. And, then I had to figure out, what did that mean? And I give readers some options of how to think about it. I don't have a definitive answer about why he said the things he said. So all of those things, it's like, you're just building layers and layers and layers of complexity when you're trying to understand a person. And, at the sort of foundational layer for me, because I am no longer a teenager, is that I know that life is long, and Richard's layers will continue to build up as he grows and develops as a person. And so who you are at 16 is not a predictor necessarily of who you will be at 26, 36, 46, and so on. But that requires that you get some help if you are doing things that are harmful to other people when you're 16.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And are you taking part in activism against discrimination against minorities?
This is such a hard question to answer because I never know where activism begins and ends. My work as a reporter is about these topics. I've spent 10 years writing about hate and teenagers with a particular emphasis on technology in more recent years, and looking at restorative justice and restorative solutions. And so is that activism? Is that my work? I don't know. I am part of the restorative justice community. In my spare time, I go to restorative justice circles. Is that activism or is that part of my work? I don't know. I fight book bans because I think that they are an assault on every freedom that is the most important. Is that activism or is that part of my work? I don't know. So all I can say is that these are the values that I have, that I try to live in everything that I do. And so I don't know where the category of activism, the boundaries are, but I do know that justice and safety for all people, and particularly for young people, is the most important thing in the world to me.
I always want to ask more questions, but I'm going to stick to the script. What has been the most surprising reaction of readers of the 57 Bus for you?
So to start out, I get incredible letters from readers of all ages. I just got a letter this week from a parent who just read the book because his kid was reading the book for school and he felt like he should read it too. And so then he had all these reactions and feelings and felt like he learned a lot, and so wrote me to tell me that. So I am surprised constantly by the things that young people or adults want to share about the impact of the book, whether because they really related and connected to somebody, either around gender or around race or around something completely different, playing games or being the class clown or having trouble with impulse control. All of that, those are all amazing. But what surprises me is that often kids don't know. Either they don't understand that the book is nonfiction, or they'll ask me a question like, have you ever met Sasha? Or have you ever met Richard? And I realized then that kids often, and probably adults too, don't know how reporting is done. They don't, they grew up, for young people, in a world where the answer to every question seems to be a few keystrokes away. And so they don't know how that information arrived inside their computers. And so now when I talk to kids, I spend a fair amount of time just explaining what my process is. That, of course, I would never write a book about two people I had never met. I spent hours interviewing people and working with them and trying to make sure that I am accurately reflecting not only the events, but also how they interpreted and experienced those events. And so even though I want the book to read like fiction, and I love that people can make that mistake, because I want it to be a page turner and I want it to be engaging and fun and interesting. And every word in it is true. Every word in it was fact checked. Every word of it can be proven. And so I want readers to understand that aspect of things. And it's often surprising to me that they don't.
It's maybe more important now than ever.
Yes, indeed.
Have you come across similar stories in the meantime?
Well, yes. I mean, unfortunately, violence against, every person under, every category in the LGBTQIA plus umbrella is still part of our world. Violence against transgender people, particularly, I think there were about 320 trans people who were murdered around the world last year. And, so much as it sometimes feels like we've made incredible progress, at the exact same time, there are forces to pull us back into a time where people couldn't be themselves, couldn't manifest their gender, their identity, their selfhood freely and safely. And so, I get Google alerts a lot of times when bad things happen. And so I keep getting them. And I wish that was not the case.
Thank you so much. That was so eloquent and well spoken, and it's a joy to listen to you.